The biggest individual player rivalry in the NBA today is Joel Embiid versus Nikola Jokic, as by a landslide, these two guys are the best centers in the NBA, who each of the past 2 years have finished top 2 in MVP voting. And only a few days ago, we were all preparing and anticipating round 2 of Embiid versus Jokic in a pivotal game. And look, I'm not going to accuse anyone of ducking a player or getting cold feet, but not seeing Embiid playing was simply astounding. And I know he has a calf injury, but this was some very bad timing and awful optics, as only a few days ago, he dropped 46 on Golden State, and now not playing versus the Joker is a very bad look, at least optics-wise. And I'm sure you guys by now are tired of me talking about the MVP, Embiid, Giannis, and Jokic. But one thing I do have to note, after Embiid ducked the Joker, the odds for MVP are now even between Joel and Nikola. And even Kendrick Perkins, the biggest Jokic hater, who has Embiid as MVP up to this point, said Joel sitting out makes him rethink his entire case. As when it comes to sitting out games, Embiid right now has missed 14 total. In non-shortened seasons for an MVP, that would be the second fewest games ever, only ahead of Bill Walton. Now, looking past Kendrick Perkins and to Embiid off the court, very recently he had some comments that turned a lot of heads. And some would say Embiid took major shots at Jokic and even Giannis. As his first quote, he says point blank he does not need a stat pad to win MVP, because his stats come naturally. And if he wanted to average 30 points per game for an extended streak, he could do that without stat padding. Very, very interesting timing with these quotes and the stat padding narrative, as earlier this month, Nikola Jokic was attacked left and right for so-called stat padding. And quite frankly, I don't get this angle of attack when it comes to Jokic. Maybe some other superstar players who stat pad, some lesser known players, but Nikola Jokic of all guys, to stat pad, I really don't see it. And you can't really look at stats for stat padding, but looking at scoring by quarter when it comes to Jokic, in the first quarter, he averages 6.9 points, the second quarter, 5.6, the third quarter, 7.3, and the fourth, 5.6. Generally speaking, when a player is stat padding, it's in a blowout when their team is up or either down. Stats-wise, Jokic is most productive in the third quarters and the first quarters, meaning based off scoring alone, he isn't stat padding late in games in the fourth quarters. Sure, he scored a bucket here and there up 20, dropped a dime, got a rebound, but on most nights, he isn't stat padding in the fourth quarter up by 25. And before I forget, the most egregious stat padding I've seen in a long time actually happened with Giannis this year versus Washington. As late in the game, he tried to pad his stats for rebounds on his own basket. And it was so comical, it was so just out of character, it was laughable. But looking at Jokic, Embiid, Giannis, I would say 95% of the time, these guys aren't stat padding. Now, looking back at Embiid, his second dig at Jokic was pretty obvious. As in a lengthy interview, he went in on defensive analytics and advanced stats. And look, Joel right here has a pretty good point, as things like Raptor per 75 brawn, his PIPM, his inverse rating of shot creation, things like that's not basketball. And looking at defense, there's really no analytics that can give you a good perception of a great defender. And for Joel, him not winning MVP has nothing to do with defensive analytics. As the past 2 years, even this year, there's one or two guys who have a little better case. As looking at Giannis, it's pretty simple. He's averaging 31, 12, and 6 on 55% shooting while only playing 32.2 minutes. Minus Chris Middleton, his team is 24-9 when he plays. And overall, they have the best record in the NBA, going 21-4 since the All-Star break. That was no advanced analytics, no crazy stats. That's the overall case for Giannis being MVP. Even looking at Jokic and his case to win the award, defensive metrics and advanced stats have no bearing for me. As quite simply, he's averaging 25, 12, and 10 on absurd shooting splits. And Denver has the best record in the West, and Jokic has only missed 8 games. And looking at his teammates specifically, the Joker's impact on them has definitely been felt, as Aaron Gordon is shooting an absurd 57.5% from the field, by far a career high. Looking at Michael Porter Jr., from 3, he's shooting 42.2%, the second best of his career. For KCP, he's at 42.5%, the highest of his career, and Jamal Murray is at 40.0%, the second highest of his career. Even looking past individual players, the entire Nuggets team dominates offensive stats, being first in field percentage, first in three-point percentage, second in assists, and second in offensive rating. I'm not saying every single offensive stat, every single player is benefiting off Jokic, but I have to imagine his teammates and team wouldn't be nearly as effective without him. And as it stands right now, if I had to rank the 3, it would go Giannis, Jokic, and Embiid as individual players, as well as MVP rankings. And looking at our last Embiid quote, this one was definitely pretty odd, as well as disappointing. As in this quote, Joel said point blank, him not winning MVP or being first team All-NBA means he has no pressure this postseason. And when it comes to pressure, the real pressure should be on those players who are winning the awards and making All-NBA teams. This right here is extremely off-putting, and reading it makes me cringe. As for Embiid, every single year he says he doesn't care about winning MVP, but every single year around the end of the season, he has comments like these, putting self-pity out there to get the voters on his side. And again, these quotes from Joel, at the end of the day, really make no sense, as him not winning the playoffs should only add pressure this postseason. And the backwards thinking of him not winning MVPs equals no pressure is so twisted and diluted, it makes my head spin. And look, compared to the Joker, Joel Embiid has had less playoff success in his career. But even with that being said, both these guys have immense pressure and equal standards come playoff time. And the last thing I do want to say, when it comes to Embiid, of course, he is a great player. When it comes to winning MVP, he's too obsessed with it and puts too much stock into opinions of voters. And if you asked his teammates, fans of Philly, would they rather have him win MVP or make the conference finals, I think everyone would say, make the conference finals. As up to this point, not once in his career has he done that, compared to the Joker, who made it in 2020, and Giannis, who won the chip in 2021. Voters this year should not give out a MVP based on empathy, sympathy, or pity. They should give it to the candidate who has the best case, not the best narrative and feel-good story. And to go full circle with this point, looking at Kendrick Perkins, the biggest Jokic hater, he raised some very valid concerns about Embiid winning MVP. As in 2021, he missed 21 games. 2022 missed 14, and this year once again has missed 14. Nikola Jokic in the past 3 years total has only missed 16 games, compared to Embiid, who in totality has missed 49. When you're talking about MVP, availability has to be a factor into who wins the award. And looking at recent play, after a rough start to March, Jokic's Denver team has turned around past 6 games, going 5-1, with him in those games averaging 27, 12, and 10 on ridiculous splits. And the biggest game in that stretch was beating Giannis and a healthy Bucks team at home, compared to Philly, who in the last 5 games has dropped 4 of them. And of course Embiid sat out or ducked Jokic on Monday. I think at this point it's pretty clear, Embiid sitting out or being hurt may have cost him the MVP, as like most years, at the wrong time, he's hurt, injured, and not playing. So that is my final point, and as always, thank you guys for watching, hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.